Hi, this is Mashnu, and here is video number 4 of the series Practical Endgames. This time it's a game that was played in 1925, this endgame, between Yates and Rubinstein in Moscow. Two grandmasters facing each other, and it's black to move here, and Rubinstein with black made a mistake here. He played the move rook to d2, and rook to d2, well, it is a very logical move, of course, because let's go back one move. The weakest point of white's position is the f2 pawn, placed on a dark square, so it's very logical to, on one hand, prevent that white defends it with rook to b2, and on the other hand, try to attack it. So rook to d2, and then perhaps the idea is to play, let me show you with arrows, perhaps to play something like rook to c2 followed by bishop to e1, then we have both pieces attacking f2. So that's the logical idea behind it. He played rook to d2 here. Why this is a mistake will become clear very soon, because white had a very beautiful surprise here. He played bishop to g4. Now there is a clear threat. This bishop cannot be taken, because then rook to h7 is checkmate. And the threat is, of course, to bring the rook to h7 and then to take on h5 with checkmate. So what to do here with black? Black played bishop to b6, threatening to take on f2 with check. Now white took this bishop, rook takes b6, and black took now on g4, h takes g4, because now there is no longer this threat on the h file. White took again with the h pawn, h takes g4, and now a beautiful motif arises. Black plays rook to b2, sacrificing the rook. If the rook is taken, then we have a stalemate position, so we have a draw. The idea of black is also that there is another, well, a similar motive. Let's say if white takes now on d6, but this did not happen in the game, but if white would have taken here, then there is rook to b6, and now this rook, this black rook, will keep offering itself, sacrificing itself in front of the other rook. It might not be taken because of stalemate. So if rook to d7 here, for example, then rook b7, and if the rook goes to d8, then rook b8 follows, and there is no way for white to escape to this stalemate trick. So this was the nice idea behind rook to b2. But white saw this. White saw this and played rook to c6. Now what's the difference? Perhaps it looks as if still we can play rook to b6 with the same trick, but it doesn't work this time. The difference is that the white rook now, when it was on d6, the pawn on d5 was obstructing the rook. Now the rook on c6 is able to move along the c file. So this rook may also go to c1, threatening mate on h1, for example. Let's have a short look if rook to b6 is played here. Now the rook may not be taken, and rook to c4 is here possible. Rook to c4. Notice that right now rook to c1 would not be enough because of rook to b1. So we need another move, and that is rook to c4. Because of a rook to b4, we have rook to e4. And now things are clearly changing. Taking this rook on e4 leads to a lost endgame for black. So white wins this pawn endgame. And if black now plays rook to b7 to prevent this checkmate idea, then rook to e6 follows, forcing the black rook to go to h7 now to prevent the checkmate. And then we have this idea of going to the first rank, rook to e1, threatens mate on h1 and it's impossible to stop. So we can say that the motive here in this part of in this line is that white actually persuades the black rook to a defensive square and then attacks on another side. Let's go back to the game, because that's also very interesting what happened after this. After rook to c6, black played not rook to b6 but rook to b1, so defending the first rank here. Now again rook to c4 was played. Now black played rook to e1 and white continued with the rook to e4. So we have a similar position as in the previous line. The first threat of course is to take the rook on e1, and if the rook moves now, then we have the same idea of, let me show you an example, rook to c1, then rook to e6 again, and we have no defense to this checkmate on the h file. So that means that here actually black is forced to take the rook. Rook takes e4. This happened in the game, and we come now to a pawn endgame that is won for white, and it's very instructive to see how this game was won. First, black took now on g4. So we have a pawn endgame of 3 pawns against 3 pawns, but there is a big difference, and that is that the white pawns are far more advanced. So white can make use of the motive of a breakthrough here, a pawn breakthrough with e5. If the pawn is taken, then d6 follows and d7, d8. Quite easy. So black played here f3 check. The king went to g1, and now he went with the king to f4. But after e6, he had to resign. So let's go one more time through this example. I'll go back to the initial position here, because we see that this beautiful move bishop g4 was not seen by black, probably. What should black have done instead of rook to d2? Do you have any idea? Perhaps you would like to have a look here, because at this point, before rook to d2, it is possible with black to achieve an equal position, to draw the game. I'm going to tell you now, the correct move would have been bishop to e1. Then, of course, bishop to g4 doesn't work any longer because of rook to d2 threatening to take on f2 immediately. So actually, this same plan that black had of attacking f2, turning the moves around, first placing the rook on the bishop on e1 and then the rook on the second rank, would have worked. So if we go back here, at this point after bishop to e1, let me go there, bishop e1, white doesn't have this bishop g4 idea, so actually white must defend now the second rank with rook to b2, preventing rook to d2 now. And here we have a balanced position. There is no way for black to attack this pawn on f2 for a second time. Now, most probably the thought process of black was that he saw this line. He saw that if he plays bishop to e1, then the white rook comes to b2, defending f2, and perhaps that's the reason why he played here rook to d2, to prevent this idea. But he didn't see this bishop to g4 coming, and now bishop b6, rook takes b6, h takes, and now he tries to draw the game by giving this rook and forcing stalemate, but white plays it very accurate. He plays rook to c6 here, so he doesn't fall into this trick of rook to takes d6 and then this stalemate trick. He plays rook to c6. After rook to b1, rook to c4, rook e1, rook e4, take, and now we have this one endgame for white with this breakthrough e5. And after a few moves, black had to resign. So this gives you perhaps some ideas of all these hidden motives in endgames. There are many endgames where this kind of breakthrough ideas or stalemate ideas are present, and we only need to discover them. And that's something that's of course very easily said, but to do it in a game is another thing. Alright, well, thank you very much for watching this one. I hope you found it instructive, and I'll see you next time on YouTube. Goodbye.